My sister pointed a manicured finger at my chest and laughed. Her voice echoed through the glass walls of the conference room. Still jobless, Kenya. Did you come here to beg for leftovers or just to embarrass me? Her husband Carter sat in the CEO chair smirking as he spun a gold pen between his fingers. The entire executive board chuckled, sipping their sparkling water, treating my humiliation like their morning entertainment. I did not say a word. I just looked at my watch. It was exactly 8:59 in the morning. I smoothed the lapel of my thrift store jacket and smiled. You have exactly 60 seconds to enjoy that laugh, Tanisha. Because at 9 o'clock the new owner of this company walks in. And spoiler alert, you are looking at her. Before I tell you how I fired my entire family and their friends in a single morning, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the underdog who was silently holding all the aces. I am Kenya, 32 years old. To my family, I am the black sheep. The failure who drives a rusted pickup truck and wears paint-stained clothes. To the rest of the world, I am a ghost. They do not know that the struggling artist facade is just that, a facade. They do not know that I founded Onyx Horizon, a venture capital firm that specializes in hostile takeovers of failing fashion brands, brands exactly like the one my sister works for. But last Friday, I was just Kenya, the failure driving my old Ford truck toward the gilded gates of the Oak Bluffs Resort in Martha's Vineyard. The sun was setting over the ocean, casting a golden glow over the manicured lawns and multi-million-dollar cottages. This was the playground of the black elite, a place where pedigree mattered more than character. I rolled down my window as I approached the security booth. The salty air smelled of money and exclusion. The guard, a burly man with a jaw square enough to crack walnuts, stepped out. He did not look at my face, he looked at my truck. His eyes scanned the dented bumper, the peeling blue paint, and the canvas tarps piled in the back. He sneered, not bothering to check his clipboard. "Deliveries are around the back," he barked, waving his hand dismissively. "The service entrance is 2 miles down the road. Turn around. You are blocking the view." I kept my hands on the steering wheel, fighting the urge to laugh. I knew for a fact that this resort was currently seeking a bridge loan from my firm to avoid bankruptcy. Technically, I owned the mortgage on the booth he was standing in, but I kept my voice steady. "I am not a delivery driver," I said calmly. "I am a guest. The name is Kenya Washington. I am here for the Lumina corporate retreat." The guard let out a dry, humorless laugh. He leaned into my window, the smell of stale coffee on his breath. "Look, lady, I do not know what game you are playing, but we have a strict policy against soliciting. We have senators and CEOs inside. We do not need people like you cluttering up the driveway. Now back this heap up before I call the police and have you towed for trespassing. People like me." The phrase hung in the air, heavy and familiar. I reached into my glove compartment to pull out my ID, but before I could, the distinct roar of a sports car engine cut through the silence. A cherry-red Porsche 911 swerved around my truck horn, blaring aggressively. The driver did not brake. He just revved the engine, forcing me to veer slightly toward the curb to avoid a collision. The Porsche screeched to a halt just past the gate. The driver door opened and my brother-in-law Carter stepped out. He was wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my first car, and his face was twisted in annoyance. But it was not Carter who terrified the guard. It was the woman stepping out of the passenger side. My sister Tanisha. She looked perfect. Her hair was laid in sleek, expensive waves. Her skin glowed with the kind of sheen that only comes from expensive facials. She adjusted her sunglasses and marched toward my truck, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement like a countdown to an explosion. The guard immediately straightened up, his demeanor shifting from aggressive to servile in a split second. "Ms. Washington," the guard stammered. "I am so sorry. This woman was refusing to leave. I was just about to call the sheriff." Tanisha did not even look at him. She stopped right by my window, looking down at me through the glass. Her eyes were not filled with relief to see her sister. They were filled with pure, unadulterated disgust. Kenya! She hissed, her voice low, so the guard would not hear. What on earth are you doing? I told you to park this piece of junk in the public lot 3 miles away. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? I opened my door and stepped out. I stretched my legs, ignoring the heat radiating from her glare. Hello to you too, Tanisha. To you too. Nice to see you. And for the record, your invite said valet parking was included. Tanisha grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Her fake smile plastered back onto her face as she noticed a group of her colleagues walking out of the lobby to greet them. She leaned close to my ear, her perfume cloying and sweet. Listen to me closely, Kenya. You are here because Mom begged me to invite you. She thinks you need a break from your pathetic life. But if you embarrass me in front of my investors, if you so much as mention that you are unemployed, I will have security throw you out faster than you can blink. Carter is trying to close a major deal this weekend. Do not ruin this. She shoved me away just as her friends approached. Her demeanor flipped instantly. The venom vanished, replaced by a sugary, condescending tone that made my stomach turn. Oh, everyone, look who made it, Tanisha announced, gesturing to me like I was a charity case she had picked up on the highway. This is my big sister, Kenya. She is having a bit of a rough patch right now, so we decided to bring her along to help out with the kids and just relax. You know how it is. Family comes first, even the difficult ones. The group of women, all holding champagne flutes, looked me up and down. Their eyes lingered on my worn sneakers and my canvas jacket. I saw the silent exchange of glances, the pity, the judgment. One of them, a woman clutching a Louis Vuitton bag, smirked. That is so sweet of you, Tanisha. It is so noble to take care of the less fortunate. Hi, Kenya. You can just leave your bag there. The bellhop might get it later. Or you can carry it around back. Tanisha laughed, a high-pitched tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. She reached into the bed of my truck and grabbed my duffel bag. It was an old gym bag frayed at the handles. Oh, she is used to carrying her own weight, Tanisha said breezily. Here, Kenya. Catch. She tossed the heavy bag at me. She did not hand it to me. She threw it. I caught it against my chest, the metal zipper scraping against my collarbone. Tanisha turned her back on me, linking arms with the woman with the Louis Vuitton bag. Come on, ladies. Let's get a drink. Carter says the Pinot Noir is to die for. Kenya, park this eyesore somewhere hidden, and then come find the kids. They need changing. I stood there in the driveway holding my battered bag. I watched my sister sashay away, her hips swaying, the red soles of her Louboutin heels flashing with every step. She thought she was the queen of the castle. She thought she was holding the leash. She had no idea that the bag she just threw at me contained a tablet with the power to liquidate her entire lifestyle with a single email. I looked at the guard. He was smirking again, clearly enjoying the show. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder and smiled at him. A cold, flat smile that didn't reach my eyes. Don't worry about the police, I told him softly. You might want to worry about your pension, though. I walked past him, entering the lion's den. They wanted a servant. They wanted a scapegoat. But by Monday morning, they would realize they had invited the executioner to dinner. The sharp crack of a titanium driver striking a golf ball echoed across the manicured lawn. I watched the white ball soar through the air, arching over the water hazard, before landing perfectly on the fairway. It was a $1 million shot, made by a man who treated people like pennies. Carter lowered his club, shading his eyes against the setting sun. When he saw me standing near the cart path, his lips curled into that familiar condescending smirk. He handed his driver to the caddy without looking at him, acting as if the world existed solely to serve his whims. He adjusted his white polo shirt, the collar popped just enough to look obnoxious, and sauntered over to where I was standing. Well, well, if it is not the family charity case, he announced, his voice carrying loud enough for the nearby players to hear. I heard Tanisha finally dragged you out of your cave. How is the job hunt going, Kenya? Or are we still calling it exploring your artistic truth these days? I kept my face neutral. I was used to Carter's microaggressions. He was a mediocre man who had married into a family of strong women, and he needed to put us down to feel tall. When I did not answer immediately, he chuckled and walked closer, wiping his hands on a towel. "Do not worry," he continued, looking at my worn-out sneakers with theatric pity. "If you are desperate for cash, I have a few pairs of Italian loafers in the trunk that need a good shine. I pay better than minimum wage. Consider it a handout from your favorite brother-in-law. Maybe if you do a good job, I will let you wash the Porsche too." My blood boiled, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. I was about to turn around and walk away when something caught my eye. It was his golf bag. It was a custom leather piece, black with gold stitching, sitting on the back of his cart. But it was not the brand that stopped me cold. It was the logo embroidered on the side pocket. A stylized sun rising over a black mountain. Onyx horizon. My heart skipped a beat. That was the logo of my venture capital firm, the firm that was secretly finalizing the paperwork to acquire a controlling stake in his company Lumina at that very moment. But here was the kicker. Those specific golf bags were limited edition corporate gifts. We had only produced 50 of them, and they were sent exclusively to the top-tier partners at our annual summit last week in Dubai. A summit Carter was definitely not invited to. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Carter was not just arrogant, he was stupid. He had somehow used the company corporate card to purchase exclusive merchandise meant for investors. He was charging $5,000 worth of custom golf gear to the Lumina expense account, probably categorizing it under client relations. He was embezzling funds from the very company I now effectively owned to buy toys for himself. I looked up from the bag and met his gaze. The anger in my chest evaporated, replaced by the cold satisfaction of a hunter who just spotted the prey walking into a trap. He thought he was mocking a jobless woman. He had no idea he was flaunting stolen goods in front of the police chief. "Nice clubs, Carter," I said softly, a small smile playing on my lips. "They look extremely expensive." He puffed out his chest, mistaking my inspection for envy. "Top of the line, Kenya. Only the best for the CFO of Lumina. Maybe one day, if you work hard enough, you can afford a single iron. But I doubt it." I nodded slowly, memorizing the serial number stitched onto the bag. "Take good care of them," I said. "You might need to sell them on eBay sooner than you think." The sun had dipped below the horizon, replacing the natural golden hour with the artificial glow of string lights and heat lamps. The patio was buzzing with the sound of clinking glass and polite, hollow laughter. I stood near the edge of the deck, holding a glass of sparkling water that I had not taken a sip from. I was trying to make myself invisible, blending into the shadows of a large potted palm, but invisibility was impossible when your sister needed a target. Tanisha was holding court near the bar, laughing loudly at a joke told by a woman wearing enough diamonds to feed a small country. I watched Tanisha scan the room. Her eyes landed on me and her smile sharpened. She excused herself from the group and began walking toward me. She was not walking in a straight line. She was weaving, creating the illusion of being tipsy, but her eyes were stone-cold sober. She held a large glass of dark, rich Merlot in her hand. I knew what was coming. I braced myself, but I did not move. If I moved, she would accuse me of making a scene. She reached me, and at the last second she feigned a stumble. Her shoulder checked mine with surprising force. It was a calculated hit, precise and malicious. The glass in her hand tipped forward, and the dark red liquid splashed across the front of my white cotton button-down shirt. The cold sensation seeped through the fabric, instantly sticking to my skin like blood. The chatter on the patio stopped. Every head turned in our direction. Tanisha gasped, covering her mouth with her hand in a display of theatrical shock that would have embarrassed a soap opera actress. "Oh my God, Kenya," she shrieked, her voice pitching up to a level that shattered the evening calm. "Look what you did. You are so clumsy." She was not looking at my shirt. She was pointing frantically at the floor. A few drops of wine had splattered onto the deck boards. "Do you have any idea how much this rental costs?" she yelled, playing to the audience. "We put down a $10,000 security deposit on this place. That is probably more than you have made in the last 5 years. If that stains, it is coming out of your imaginary paycheck." Carter pushed his way through the crowd, shaking his head as he looked at the mess. "Great going, Kenya," he sneered. "Cannot take you anywhere without you ruining something. Someone get some club soda before she costs us our deposit." The guests whispered among themselves. I could hear phrases like "poor thing" and "so unrefined" drifting through the air. They looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance, seeing exactly what Tanisha wanted them to see. The screw-up sister. The liability. I did not reach for a napkin. I did not apologize. I did not look at my ruined shirt. Instead, I slowly lowered my gaze to the floorboard Tanisha was so hysterical about. I crouched down, running my finger over the wet spot. I knew this material. I had rejected it for one of my budget apartment complexes in Chicago 2 years ago because it looked cheap under direct light. I stood up and looked Tanisha dead in the eye. The silence stretched out thick and heavy. "Relax, Tanisha," I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through her hysteria. "It is not real mahogany. It is luxury vinyl plank. Look at the grain pattern. It repeats every 6 inches. I took a step closer to her, forcing her to take a step back. "It is waterproof and scratch-resistant, sold at Home Depot for $3 a square foot." I continued, keeping my face impassive. "You could pour a gallon of bleach on this and it would not stain. But you might want to be careful with your weave. I hear that reacts poorly to moisture." I turned my back on her stunned face and walked toward the sliding glass doors. As I passed a waiter, I placed my untouched water on his tray. "By the way," I called back over my shoulder without stopping, "you overpaid for the rental." I walked into the house, leaving my sister standing there with her mouth open, surrounded by a crowd that was suddenly laughing at the floor instead of me. She wanted to humiliate me with her wealth, but she forgot one thing. You cannot fake quality when you are standing in front of an appraiser. And I had just appraised her entire life as a cheap imitation. The dinner table was a battlefield of pretension. We were seated at a long mahogany table under a chandelier that probably cost more than my first car. The air was thick with the smell of roasted duck and expensive cologne. I sat at the far end, sandwiched between a woman who kept checking her reflection in her spoon and a man who was loudly bragging about his stock portfolio. So I told my broker to go all in on TechStream. The man next to me said, spraying crumbs of bread roll onto the tablecloth, "It is the next Amazon. I am projecting a 300% return by next quarter." I took a slow sip of my water. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. TechStream. That was the company my analysts had flagged yesterday as a sinking ship. Their CEO was currently under investigation for insider trading, and their stock was about to be delisted. But I did not say anything. I just let him enjoy his fantasy wealth a little longer. Tanisha tapped her fork against her glass, drawing the attention of the room. She looked radiant, or at least she thought she did. To me, she looked like a woman trying desperately to outrun her credit card limit. Speaking of investments, Tanisha said, her eyes sliding down the table to land on me, like a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. "Kenya, what are you investing in these days?" "Oh wait, I forgot. You need an income to invest." The table erupted in polite, cruel laughter. Tanisha smirked, emboldened by her audience. "Seriously though, Kenya," she continued, leaning forward, "you are 32 years old, no husband, no kids, no career. Do you plan on just floating through life forever? Or are you waiting for a rich prince to rescue you? Because let me tell you, at your age, the princes are looking for 20-year-olds. A woman across from me, the one with the fake Louis Vuitton bag, chimed in. "It is true. My life coach says that a woman without a legacy is just taking up space. You really should think about your future, Kenya. You cannot live off Tanisha's charity forever. It is not fair to her or Carter." I placed my fork down gently. They were not just insulting me. They were dissecting me. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. Carter, who had been busy dissecting his steak, finally looked up. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and disdain that he reserved for anyone who did not drive a luxury car. You have to understand the reality of the world we live in, Kenya. Carter said, his voice dropping to a register that he thought sounded wise and authoritative. We are black in America. Nobody is going to hand us anything. We have to work twice as hard to get half of what they have. Look at me. Look at Tanisha. We grind every single day. He paused for dramatic effect, looking around the table to make sure everyone was listening to his sermon. But you, Carter said, shaking his head, you are the exception to the rule. We have to work twice as hard, but Kenya sleeps twice as hard. The room exploded. The guests slapped the table, howling with laughter. Carter leaned back, looking satisfied with his punchline. He thought he was offering tough love. He thought he was the example of black excellence. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sweat on his brow. I saw the way his hand shook slightly when he reached for his wine. He was talking about hard work, but I knew the truth. I knew about the creative accounting. I knew about the loans. I knew that he was drowning, and the only reason he was still afloat was because I hadn't pulled the plug yet. I picked up my glass and raised it slightly in his direction. That is a very interesting perspective, Carter, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a knife. I guess we will see who has been sleeping and who has been wide awake come Monday morning. Dinner was finally over, but the humiliation was apparently just beginning. Tanisha wiped the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin and stood up. The heels of her shoes clicked sharply on the hardwood floor as she beckoned for me to follow her. We walked through the sprawling rental property, passing expansive guest suites with king-sized beds and private balconies overlooking the ocean. I saw empty rooms with crisp white linens and fluffy towels folded into swans. I assumed we were heading to one of the garden view rooms at the back of the house. I was wrong. Tanisha walked past the guest wing entirely. She led me through the kitchen, past the pantry, and into a narrow service hallway that smelled faintly of bleach and stale dryer sheets. The air in the hallway was stiflingly hot, a sharp contrast to the aggressive air conditioning in the rest of the house. Tanisha stopped in front of a narrow door right next to the industrial-sized laundry machines. The dryer was tumbling loudly, creating a rhythmic thumping noise that vibrated through the floorboards. Tanisha opened the door with a flourish, as if she were revealing a presidential suite. "Here we are," she said, her voice dripping with fake apology. "I know it is a bit cozy, but we ran out of guest rooms. Carter invited a few more investors last minute, and obviously paying guests take priority." I stepped inside. It was not a bedroom. It was a storage closet that had been hastily converted. There was no window. Stacks of extra chairs and cleaning supplies lined one wall. In the center, someone had unfolded a creaky metal cot with a thin, lumpy mattress. There were no sheets, just a scratchy wool blanket thrown on top. The room was sweltering, likely because the vent from the dryer ran directly behind the wall. I turned to look at Tanisha. She was leaning against the doorframe, checking her nails. She did not look sorry. She looked smug. She wanted to see me complain. She wanted me to beg for a better room so she could tell me no. "I know it is not the Ritz," Tanisha said, letting out a small, cruel laugh. "But honestly, Kenya, it is probably not much different from that studio apartment you are living in back in the city. You are used to roughing it. The rest of us need our beauty sleep to function at a high level. You know how it is." She reached out and patted my arm, a gesture that felt more like a slap. "Besides," she added, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "the maid comes at 6 in the morning to start the laundry. Since you are right here, maybe you can give her a hand. God knows you have plenty of experience cleaning up messes." I looked at the cot. I looked at the bleach bottles stacked on the shelf. Then I looked at my sister. She was enjoying this. She was feeding off my perceived poverty like a vampire. She thought she was putting me in my place. It is perfect, Tanisha, I said, keeping my face completely blank. Thank you for your hospitality. Her smile faltered for a second. She had expected tears or anger. My indifference confused her. Right, she muttered, pushing off the doorframe. Well, sleep tight. Try not to snore. The walls are thin. She slammed the door shut, plunging me into darkness. I stood there for a moment, listening to the thudding of the dryer next door. It was loud, hot, and claustrophobic. But as I sat down on the squeaky cot, I did not feel small. I felt focused. She had put me in the utility room because she saw me as a tool, a servant, someone to be used and discarded. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The screen illuminated the small, sad room. I had a message from my lawyer confirming the final acquisition documents were ready for signature at 9 o'clock the next morning. Tanisha thought she had put me in a prison. She did not realize she had just given me a war room. I was going to sleep on this lumpy cot, and I was going to wake up and take everything she thought she owned. I waited until the sound of Tanisha's footsteps faded down the hallway. The laundry machine next to me was still thumping rhythmically, a mechanical heartbeat in the stifling heat of the storage closet. I reached up and slid the rusted deadbolt on the door. The click echoed in the small space, signaling the end of Kenya the doormat and the return of Kenya the CEO. I sat down on the lumpy cot and pulled my battered gym bag onto my lap. Tanisha had thrown this bag at me earlier, treating it like a sack of dirty laundry. She had no idea that the contents of this bag were worth more than her husband's entire annual salary. I unzipped the main compartment and pushed aside the layer of thrift store sweaters I used as camouflage. Underneath the false bottom lay a sleek carbon fiber laptop case. I opened it. The screen came to life, casting a cool blue glow that cut through the darkness of the utility room. It recognized my face instantly, bypassing the biometric security. I wasn't just checking email. I was logging into the Onyx Horizon mainframe, the nerve center of a multi-billion-dollar investment empire. I slipped on my noise-canceling earbuds, drowning out the dryer, and initiated a secure video call. The face of my personal assistant David appeared on the screen within seconds. He was in our New York office, looking impeccable in a tailored suit, a stark contrast to my current surroundings. "Good evening, Ms. Washington," David said, his voice crisp and professional. "I did not expect to hear from you. I thought you were undercover this weekend." "I am," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, commanding register. "But the situation has escalated. I need you to run a Level 4 diagnostic on Lumina's financials. Specifically, I want you to pull every single expense report filed by Carter Vance in the last 18 months. David began typing immediately, the sound of his keystrokes furious and fast. "Is there something specific I should be looking for?" he asked. I leaned closer to the screen. "Look for misappropriation of funds disguised as vendor payments. Look for luxury assets purchased under corporate accounts. I want to know how a CFO of a failing company can afford a brand new Porsche 911 and limited edition Onyx Horizon golf clubs." David paused. "The golf clubs?" he asked. "The ones we only sent to the Diamond Tier partners." "Exactly," I said. "He has them, which means he bought them using company funds, likely writing it off as a client gift. If he is dumb enough to flaunt stolen merchandise in front of me, he is dumb enough to leave a paper trail. I want to know where the money is coming from. I want to know which accounts he is draining. And David, I want to know if Tanisha's name is on any of the shell companies he is using to wash the money." There was a moment of silence as David processed the request. He looked up, his expression serious. "If I find what you are suggesting, this goes beyond a bad investment. This is federal wire fraud." "I know," I said, my eyes hardening. "Dig deep, David. Check the credit card statements. Check the travel logs. I want a complete forensic audit on my screen before I wake up tomorrow morning. They think I am sleeping in a closet. I want to make sure that by Monday they are sleeping in a cell." "Understood," David said. "I will put the forensic team on it immediately." "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, looking around the cramped, windowless room. "Prepare the acquisition papers. We are going to execute the hostile takeover on Monday morning. But I want a specific clause added to the contract regarding the termination of executive leadership for cause. I want to make sure when I fire them, they walk away with absolutely nothing. I closed the laptop. The room went dark again, save for the blinking light of the dryer. I lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling. Carter and Tanisha were upstairs, probably drinking expensive wine and laughing about how they had put me in my place. They didn't realize that while they were playing house, I was playing chess, and I had just moved my queen into position. I woke up to the sound of screaming. It was not the terrified scream of someone in danger. It was the angry, desperate screaming of someone who had just realized their house of cards was about to collapse. I sat up on the lumpy cot, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The laundry room was stiflingly hot, the air heavy with the chemical scent of detergent, but the heat coming from the hallway was entirely different. It was the heat of a meltdown. I stood up and pressed my ear against the thin door. The walls of this rental were paper thin, just like Tanisha's patience. "You said you handled it, Carter," Tanisha shrieked. Her voice was shrill, cracking with panic. $2 million does not just vanish into thin air. If the acquisition team sees a deficit that large, the deal is off. Do you understand me? The deal is dead. I heard the sound of heavy pacing. That would be Carter. I could practically picture the sweat beading on his forehead, staining the collar of his expensive polo shirt. "Keep your voice down," Carter hissed, his voice trembling. "I did handle it. I moved the funds to the shell companies in the Caymans just like we planned. But the transfer got flagged by the automated system. It is showing up as a liability instead of an expense. I just need time to recode the entries." "You do not have time," Tanisha yelled, though she lowered her volume slightly. "The new chairman of Onyx Horizon is sending a forensic audit team tomorrow morning. Monday morning, Carter. That is in 24 hours. If they see a $2 million hole in the ledger, they are not just going to fire us. They are going to prosecute us. I am not going to prison because you do not know how to cook the books properly." I leaned back against the washing machine, a cold smile spreading across my face. This was better than any movie. They were terrified of the new chairman. They were terrified of the ruthless corporate raider who was coming to tear their lives apart. They had absolutely no idea that the monster they were afraid of was currently wearing pajamas and standing 10 feet away in their utility closet. "We need to fix the spreadsheet before they arrive," Carter said, his voice sounding desperate. "We need to bury that $2 million under operational costs. Make it look like server maintenance or software depreciation, something boring that they won't check." "I cannot do that math," Carter Tanisha snapped. "I work in marketing. I barely know how to use Excel. If we mess up the formulas, it will look obvious. We need someone who understands numbers but is stupid enough not to ask questions." There was a long silence. I held my breath. I knew exactly where this was going. "Wait a minute," Carter said slowly. "Your sister, Kenya. Did not she study accounting or something before she decided to become a starving artist?" Tanisha snorted. "Kenya. She is a failure, Carter. She lives in a studio apartment and drives a truck. You want to trust our freedom to her." "She is desperate," Tanisha Carter replied, his voice gaining confidence. "Desperate people do not ask questions. We tell her it is just some data entry work. We offer her $500. She will be so grateful for the cash she will do whatever we say. She will hide the money for us, and if the auditors find it, guess whose fingerprints are on the keyboard?" I listened to them plotting to frame me. They wanted to use me as a shield. They wanted to pay me pennies to cover up their multi-million-dollar theft. I walked over to the mirror hanging on the back of the door and fixed my hair. "Knock, knock," I whispered to my reflection. "Opportunity is calling." I unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway, putting on my best tired, beaten-down expression. I was ready to play their game. I would fix their books all right. I would fix them exactly the way a forensic accountant fixes a crime scene. I would make sure every single stolen dollar pointed directly back to them. The heavy stack of financial documents hit the marble countertop with a thud that echoed through the kitchen. I looked up from the coffee machine to see Carter standing there, his face glistening with a sheen of nervous sweat that he was trying desperately to hide. Tanisha was right behind him, her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. They did not look like a power couple enjoying a weekend getaway. They looked like two cornered animals looking for a scapegoat. Carter pushed the pile of papers toward me with the back of his hand as if touching them would burn him. "You were always the math nerd in high school, Kenya," Carter said, his voice tight. "Tanisha says you used to win all those calculus competitions before you decided to throw your life away on art." I stared at the documents. The cover page was stamped with the Lumina logo and the words, "Internal Audit Draft." I was okay with numbers, I said, slowly playing the part of the slow-witted sister. "Why? What is this?" Tanisha stepped forward, rolling her eyes. "It is just a formatting error, Kenya. Do not overthink it." Carter's team messed up the data entry for the quarterly report. The expenses are showing up in the wrong columns and the totals are not matching the bank statements. We need you to manually reconcile them. She pulled a crisp $500 bill from her purse and waved it in front of my face. "We need this done by lunch," she continued. "If you can make these numbers match what Carter tells you, to write this money is yours. You can finally go buy some clothes that do not look like they came from a donation bin. Maybe even get a haircut. Consider it an early birthday present." I looked at the money, then at the papers. They were not asking me to fix a formatting error. They were asking me to commit fraud. They wanted me to take their losses and bury them under fake operational costs so the new owners would not notice the missing millions until it was too late. They were so arrogant, so blinded by their own self-importance that they were handing the smoking gun directly to the executioner. I reached out and took the papers. I flipped through the first few pages. It was sloppy work. Money moved to offshore accounts labeled vaguely as consulting fees. "You just want me to make the columns match?" I asked, keeping my voice innocent. "Even if the math seems a little off." Carter slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. "Just do what you are told, Kenya," he snapped. "Do not ask questions. That is why you are poor. You think too much and do too little. Just make the red numbers turn black. Can you handle that? Or is that too complicated for your artistic brain?" I looked him dead in the eye. I felt the weight of the paper in my hands. This was it. This was the evidence I needed to send him to federal prison for 20 years. "I can handle it, Carter," I said softly. "I will make sure the numbers tell exactly the right story." "Good," Tanisha said, snatching the money back and placing it on the counter just out of my reach. "You get the cash when the job is done. Now get to work, we have a brunch to attend." They walked out of the kitchen laughing about which champagne to order. I picked up the pen. I was going to fix their numbers all right. I was going to fix them into a noose that would hang them both. I waited until the sound of the front door latch clicked shut. Through the kitchen window, I watched Carter and Tanisha climb into the red Porsche, laughing as they sped off toward their brunch. They thought they had left a fool in the kitchen to clean up their mess. In reality, they had just left a forensic auditor alone with the murder weapon. I sat down at the island and spread the documents out in a fan. I did not need a calculator. I could smell the fraud coming off the pages like cheap perfume. I started with the accounts payable ledger. At a glance, it looked standard. Vendor payments, consulting fees, logistics costs. But when you have analyzed as many bankrupt companies as I have, you learn to spot the patterns. The rhythm of theft. I ran my finger down the column marked Marketing Consultants. There were monthly payments of $15,000 going to a company called C&T Strategic Partners. C&T, Carter, and Tanisha. It was so lazy, it was almost insulting. I pulled up the invoice details for these payments. Description of services simply read, brand strategy. No hours logged, no deliverables attached. Just free money flowing out of Lumina's operating budget and into their pockets. But that was just the appetizer. I flipped to the capital expenditures section. That was where the real money was hiding. I found a wire transfer for $200,000 to an entity called Blue Heron Holdings LLC. The address listed for Blue Heron was not an office park. It was a residential address in Miami. I recognized that address instantly because Tanisha had posted a photo of it on Instagram 3 months ago with the caption "Vacation Home Goals." They had bought a condo in Florida using company funds and disguised it as an asset acquisition. The arrogance was breathtaking. They did not even try to hide it well. They assumed no one would look closely because they were the bosses. They assumed the auditors would just rubber stamp the paperwork, because Carter was a white man in a suit and Tanisha was charming. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a microfiber cloth. I took off my thick black-rimmed glasses, the ones Tanisha called my birth control glasses, because she said they made me look unappealing. She did not know that these frames were a prototype from one of the tech startups I had funded last year. They were equipped with high-definition cameras and direct cloud upload capability. I put the glasses back on and tapped the temple twice to start recording. I systematically turned every page of the ledger. I captured the fraudulent invoices. I captured the mismatched tax ID numbers. I captured the signature page where Carter had authorized payments to himself. I captured the email printout where Tanisha had asked to expense her personal wardrobe as costume design for a photo shoot that never happened. Every image was instantly encrypted and uploaded to the secure server at Onyx Horizon. By the time I finished, I had enough evidence to put them away for wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. I stacked the papers back into a neat pile exactly as they had left them. I felt a cold, hard knot of satisfaction in my chest. They wanted me to fix the numbers. Oh, I was going to fix them. I was going to highlight every single lie in neon red ink for the FBI. I looked at the empty kitchen, at the expensive appliances they had probably bought with stolen money, and I whispered to the empty room, "You guys really should have hired a better accountant." I pushed the stack of papers across the cold marble island until they hit Carter's chest. He looked down at the documents, then up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and rising anger. Tanisha stopped applying her lip gloss and turned around, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Is it done?" Carter asked, his voice tight. "Did you fix the variances?" I stood up, smoothing the front of my shirt, where the wine stain from the night before had dried into a dark purple bruise. I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Carter," I said, my voice steady and loud enough for Tanisha to hear clearly. "I did not fix them. Because these are not variances. These are felonies. You are not asking me to correct a spreadsheet. You are asking me to become an accessory to federal wire fraud and embezzlement. I am not going to help you go to prison." The silence that followed was deafening. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the expensive refrigerator. Then Carter's face turned a deep, ugly shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged as he slammed his fist onto the counter, making the silverware jump. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled, stepping into my personal space. "You are a broke, jobless charity case. You do not get to have a moral compass. You do not get to judge me." He lunged forward, his hand grabbing the collar of my shirt. He twisted the fabric, pulling me toward him until I could smell the coffee and desperation on his breath. Tanisha gasped, but she did not move to stop him. She just watched, her eyes wide with excitement. "You listen to me, Kenya," Carter hissed, spit flying from his mouth. "I pay for the food you eat. I pay for the roof over your head this weekend. I own you. When I tell you to jump, you ask how high. When I tell you to cook the books, you turn on the stove. Do you understand me?" I felt the fabric of my shirt tightening against my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. He had just assaulted me. He had just given me the final piece of ammunition I needed to destroy him completely. I did not struggle. I did not scream. I just stared at him with cold, dead eyes. Take your hand off me, Carter, I whispered, my voice dropping to a dangerous register. Or you will regret it for the rest of your very short career. He laughed, a harsh barking sound. Regret it. You are nothing without us, Kenya. If you walk out that door, you starve. Now sit down, pick up that pen and fix these numbers before I throw you out on the street where you belong. He shoved me backward. I stumbled, catching myself against the granite countertop. I looked at Tanisha, waiting for her to step in to be a sister. Tanisha sighed, checking her watch. Just do it, Kenya, she said, sounding bored. Stop being so dramatic. Carter is stressed. Just help the family so we can go to brunch. I straightened my shirt. I looked at the papers scattered on the floor. I am not doing it, I said, my voice final. And neither should you. Carter's eyes went black with rage. He took a step toward me, his hand raising as if to strike. You ungrateful little parasite, he muttered. I braced myself. Let him do it. Let him strike the match that would burn his entire world down. The silence in the kitchen did not last long. I was still standing by the island, watching the dust motes dance in the sunlight, when Tanisha stormed back into the room. She was not wearing her coat anymore. She had taken off her sunglasses, and her face was flushed with a manic kind of energy. She began tearing through the drawers, throwing silverware and linen napkins onto the floor. Carter followed her in, looking confused but agitated. I cannot find it! Carter! Tanisha screamed, her voice vibrating with artificial panic. I put it right here on the counter before I went to get my purse. It is gone. The Rolex is gone. I leaned against the refrigerator, crossing my arms. I watched Tanisha's performance with a mixture of boredom and disgust. It was a gold Daytona worth maybe $40,000. Carter wore it like a personality trait. Tanisha was overturning fruit bowls and looking under the espresso machine, places where a watch would never be. It has to be here, Carter yelled, catching on to the act. That watch is uninsured, Tanisha. If it is lost, we are out 50 grand. Tanisha stopped moving. She stood perfectly still for a moment, then slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were wide, predatory. It is not lost, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It was stolen. She marched toward me. I did not flinch. I did not move. You are the only one who has been in this kitchen, Kenya, she accused, pointing a finger in my face. You are the only one desperate enough to steal from family. Where is it? Give it back and maybe we will not call the police. I did not have time to answer before she lunged for my canvas tote bag, which was sitting on the floor by the pantry. I had left it there when I came in to make coffee. Tanisha grabbed the straps and upended the bag. My sketch pad, my pencils, and a few toiletries spilled out onto the marble floor. And there, tumbling out with a heavy metallic clunk, was the gold Rolex. It slid across the floor and stopped at Carter's feet. The room went silent. Tanisha looked at me, feigning shock, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, she gasped. Kenya! How could you? After everything we have done for you, you steal from us. You are nothing but a common criminal. Carter picked up the watch, polishing it on his shirt. He looked at me with pure contempt. I knew it, he spat. Once a loser, always a loser. You were going to pawn this for what? Rent money. Drugs. I looked at the bag on the floor. I had been standing 10 feet away from it the entire time. Tanisha must have slipped the watch inside when she brushed past me earlier, or maybe she did it right before she started her screaming fit. It was a classic setup, crude, effective, and completely lacking in imagination. Tanisha stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. She lowered her voice so only I could hear, dropping the hysterical act instantly. You have two choices now, big sister, she hissed. You can pick up that pen and fix the accounting records like we asked. Or we can call the police right now and tell them we caught you red-handed. Grand larceny gets you 5 years in state prison. What is it going to be? Are you a helpful sister or are you a felon? She smiled, waiting for me to break. She thought she had checkmated me. She thought the fear of prison would force me to cover up their crimes. She did not realize that by planting evidence she had just upgraded her own charges from fraud to conspiracy and extortion. I looked down at my spilled belongings. I looked at the watch, and then I looked at Tanisha. "Call them," I said. Her smile flickered. "What did you say?" "I said call the police." "Tanisha," I repeated, my voice ice cold. "Let us see who they believe. The woman with the motive or the woman who owns the security company that installed the cameras in this kitchen?" I pointed to the tiny black dome in the corner of the ceiling. Tanisha's face went pale. I was bluffing about owning the security company, but I knew for a fact this rental had cameras. And I knew for a fact that Tanisha had just dug her own grave on high-definition video. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on, but it broke the moment my mother walked through the door. Beatrice Washington did not enter a room. She made an entrance. She was wearing a silk caftan that flowed around her like judgment robes, and her face was set in a mask of perpetual disapproval. Tanisha did not waste a second. She ran to our mother, burying her face in Beatrice's shoulder, forcing out fake tears that were impressive even for her. "Mom," Tanisha sobbed, her voice muffled against the silk. "I cannot believe it. We invited her here out of pity. We tried to help her. And this is how she repays us. She robbed us, Mom. She stole Carter's watch right off the counter." Beatrice did not look at me with concern. She did not ask for my side of the story. She looked at me with exhaustion. She sighed, a long, heavy sound that I had heard 1,000 times growing up. It was the sound of a woman who had already decided I was guilty before the trial even started. She patted Tanisha's back and gently pushed her aside. "Kenya," she said, her voice dripping with maternal disappointment. "Please tell me you did not do this." I opened my mouth to speak, to explain the setup, but she held up a hand to silence me. She did not want to hear it. She marched over to my canvas bag, which was still lying on the floor where Tanisha had dumped it. I watched her hands, the same hands that used to braid my hair, now violating my privacy without a second thought. She treated my belongings like trash, kicking aside my sketchbook with the toe of her expensive sandal. She rummaged through the pile until her fingers closed around the cold gold medal. She pulled the Rolex out, holding it up to the light like a contaminated object. Carter let out a dramatic sigh of relief, but Beatrice did not look at him. She stared at me, her eyes hard and cold. "I raised you better than this, Kenya," she said, shaking her head slowly. "I know things are hard for you. I know it must be difficult seeing your sister so successful. I know you look at her life, her car, her husband, and you feel jealous. That is natural. But stealing—" She took a step toward me, clutching the watch tight. "We have a saying in this family, Kenya. You can be poor, but you must be clean. You can be down on your luck, but you must keep your dignity. Today you are neither. You are just a common thief. You have brought shame into this house." The words hit me harder than any slap. She truly believed it. She believed I was capable of stealing from my own family because in her mind I was already a failure. My success, my company, my millions, none of it existed to her because she never bothered to look past the surface. She saw a daughter in a thrift store shirt and assumed the worst. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I looked at the watch in her hand, the watch her favorite son-in-law had bought with stolen money. "I am not the one bringing shame to this family, Mother," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But you are too blind to see where the dirt really is." Beatrice narrowed her eyes. "Do not you dare speak back to me. Apologize to your sister. Apologize to Carter. And then you are going to spend the rest of the day in your room thinking about what you have become." I watched the three of them standing there, a tableau of betrayal. Tanisha the liar, Carter the thief, and Beatrice the enabler. They thought they had broken me, but all they had done was sever the last thread of loyalty I had left. I did not apologize. I just turned around and walked out, knowing that when I returned, I wouldn't be coming back as a daughter. I would be coming back as a creditor. My mother stood there clutching the gold watch, her chest heaving with theatrical disappointment. Tanisha was practically vibrating with glee standing behind her. She had won. She had successfully framed me, humiliated me, and turned our mother against me in one fell swoop. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "I am calling the sheriff." Tanisha announced, her eyes gleaming with malice. You need a wake-up call, Kenya. Maybe a night in a holding cell will teach you some respect for other people's property. Beatrice nodded in agreement. Do it, Tanisha. Your sister has lost her way. Tough love is the only thing that will save her now. I watched Tanisha tap the screen. I did not move to stop her. I did not beg. I did not cry. Instead, I walked over to the kitchen island and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were perfectly steady. I took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. Carter was watching me closely, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He expected me to be on my knees. My calmness was terrifying him. Do it, I said, setting the glass down with a soft clink. Call them Tanisha. Put it on speaker. I would love to talk to the sheriff. Tanisha hesitated, her thumb freezing inches from the call button. You think I am bluffing? She sneered. I know you are not, I replied, leaning back against the counter. But here is what is going to happen when they get here. I am going to insist on a full forensic analysis of that watch. You see, gold holds fingerprints beautifully, and since I have not touched that watch, the only prints they will find on the clasp and the face will belong to you and Carter. I am sure the police will find it very interesting that the thief's prints are missing, but the victim's prints are all over the stolen goods. Tanisha scowled. I found it in your bag. Of course I touched it. And then there is the matter of the search warrant. I continued, shifting my gaze to Carter. Once the police are here investigating a felony grand larceny, I will have to tell them about everything else I have seen in this house. I will tell them to open the wall safe in the master bedroom closet. Carter went rigid. His face turned the color of ash. What safe? Beatrice asked, looking confused. Carter, what is she talking about? I smiled at my brother-in-law. The safe where Carter keeps the $50,000 in cash he skimmed from the construction budget last month. It is undeclared income, Carter. Possession of that amount of illicit cash along with the fake invoices I saw earlier. That is not just theft, that is money laundering. Carter lunged forward and grabbed Tanisha's wrist, yanking the phone away from her so hard she yelped. No police, he barked, his voice cracking with panic. What are you doing, Carter? Tanisha shrieked. She stole from us. I said no police, Carter yelled, sweat pouring down his face. He turned to Beatrice, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. Mom, we cannot do that to Kenya. She is family. I cannot let my sister-in-law go to jail. I am a merciful man. We will handle this internally. Beatrice looked at Carter, her eyes softening. Oh, Carter, you are a saint. Even after what she did, you still protect her. You are too good for this world. I watched them, the saint and the thief. Carter was not protecting me. He was protecting his own skin. He knew that if the police walked through that door, his entire life would unravel. He glared at me over Beatrice's shoulder. It was a look of pure hatred, but beneath it was fear. Deep, trembling fear. He knew I knew. And he knew that for the first time in his life, he was not the one in control. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed like a gunshot in the silence of the hallway. Tanisha had actually locked me in. It was a punishment designed for a rebellious teenager, not a 32-year-old woman. They thought the isolation would break me. They thought that by sticking me next to the water heater in the dark, I would spend the night crying and reflecting on my sins. They wanted me to wake up submissive, ready to beg for their forgiveness, and ready to commit their crimes just to be let out. I sat down on the edge of the cot. The room was pitch black save for the sliver of light creeping under the doorframe from the kitchen. I did not cry. I did not pound on the door. Instead, I felt a calm, cold clarity wash over me. The time for observation was over. The time for mercy had passed the moment my mother chose a stolen watch over her own daughter. I pulled my encrypted phone from my pocket. The screen glowed, illuminating the shelves of bleach and detergent stacked around me. It was poetic, really. They had locked me in with the cleaning supplies, and I was about to do exactly what this room was designed for. I was going to clean house. I opened the secure messaging app. My thumb hovered over the contact named Richard Sterling, the head of legal at Onyx Horizon. It was midnight. Richard would be asleep, but his phone was set to override any silent mode for a message from me. It was time to drop the hammer. I typed out 3 words. Initiate, clean sweep. This was not just a standard hostile takeover. Clean sweep was a scorched earth protocol. It meant that simultaneous to the acquisition, we would be executing immediate asset freezes on all executives under investigation for financial misconduct. It meant that when the sun rose, Carter would not just be losing his job, he would be losing access to every bank account he owned. His credit cards would decline, his passcodes would be revoked, he would be a ghost in his own life. A reply appeared instantly. 3 dancing dots turned into a message. Protocol confirmed. Asset freeze ready. Security team on standby at Lumina HQ. Shall we proceed with the proxy representative for the board meeting? I stared at the screen. Usually I let my lawyers handle the initial confrontation. I preferred to remain in the shadows, the invisible hand moving the pieces. But not this time. This was personal. I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see the moment the arrogance drained out of Carter's eyes. I wanted to see Tanisha realize that the sister she mocked was the one signing her termination letter. I typed back immediately. Negative. I will be there in person. I am chairing the meeting myself. Richard replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. I set the alarm for 5 a.m. I needed to be out of this house before they woke up. I needed to get to the airstrip, change into my power suit, and prepare for the performance of a lifetime. Upstairs, my family was sleeping soundly, dreaming of the wealth they thought they had secured. They did not hear the digital hum of the guillotine blade being hoisted into position. They did not know that the woman in the closet was not a prisoner. She was the warden. And tomorrow, sentencing would begin. The sun beat down on the manicured lawn of the rental estate as Sunday afternoon arrived. Tanisha had labeled this event the farewell soiree. I called it the Last Supper. My sister walked into the kitchen where I was standing and shoved a heavy silver tray into my chest. She was wearing a white linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than my truck. She looked at me with a smirk that chilled the air despite the heat. Here, she said, since you clearly have sticky fingers when it comes to gold watches, you can work off your debt. The catering staff is short-handed, so you are going to serve the champagne. I looked at the tray loaded with crystal flutes. I looked at Tanisha. She was not asking. She was commanding. And Kenya, she added, looking me up and down with disdain. Try not to look so miserable. Smile. These are important people. Maybe if you do a good job, one of them will toss you a tip. God knows you need it. I took the tray without a word and walked out onto the patio. The humiliation was designed to be public. Tanisha had clearly told everyone the lie about the watch because as soon as I stepped outside, the conversation died. 30 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I saw the whispers. I saw the judgment. I moved through the crowd offering drinks to people who refused to make eye contact with me. Champagne. I asked a man in a blue suit. He took a glass without looking at me, continuing his conversation. Yeah, thanks. Hey Carter, is this the sister-in-law you were telling us about? The one with the kleptomania? Carter laughed, slapping the man on the back. That is her. We are trying to teach her the value of honest work. It is a rehabilitation program. The group erupted in laughter. I stood there holding the heavy tray, feeling the muscles in my arms burn. I let them laugh. I let them treat me like the help. I let them believe that I was nothing more than a cautionary tale. I walked over to a group of women sitting by the pool. One of them, a woman named Sheila who worked in human resources at Lumina, looked at me with a sneer. Make sure you keep an eye on your purse, she whispered loudly to her friend. The help has a habit of taking souvenirs. I placed a glass of champagne on the table next to her. I wanted to pour it over her expensive hair. I wanted to tell her that as of 9 a.m. tomorrow, her department was being outsourced and her severance package was non-existent. But I did not. I just smiled. Enjoy it, Sheila, I said softly. It is the best champagne you will be drinking for a very long time. She frowned, not understanding. I walked away, the tray getting lighter but my resolve getting heavier. They were celebrating their success on the deck of a sinking ship, and I was the only one who could see the iceberg. They thought I was serving them drinks. In reality, I was serving them their last meal. The golden hour sun cast long shadows across the deck, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. Tanisha stood at the head of the patio table, tapping a silver spoon against her crystal champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter, commanding attention. She waited until every eye was fixed on her, basking in the spotlight like a lizard on a rock. Carter stood beside her, his arm draped possessively around her waist, looking every bit the proud, wealthy husband. I stood in the corner holding a tray of empty glasses, invisible to everyone, except as a prop in their play of success. I have a huge announcement to make. Tanisha beamed, her voice dripping with excitement. Carter and I have decided to make our biggest investment yet. We are officially closing on a property back in Atlanta next week. The guests murmured appreciatively. Someone shouted, "Another vacation home." Tanisha laughed, tossing her hair back. "No, this one is special. You all know the old family home in the West End. The one our grandmother lived in for 50 years. Well, Carter and I are buying it from the estate." My heart hammered against my ribs. Grandma's house. That small Victorian cottage with the wraparound porch was the only place I had ever known peace. It was where Grandma taught me how to paint. It was where I hid when Tanisha and my mother made me feel worthless. A guest raised a glass. "That is wonderful, Tanisha. Keeping it in the family. Are you going to restore it?" Carter chuckled, shaking his head. "Restore it? Have you seen the place? It is a teardown. The foundation is cracked. The plumbing is ancient, and frankly, it is an eyesore in an up-and-coming neighborhood." Tanisha nodded vigorously. "Exactly. We are doing the neighborhood a favor. We are going to bulldoze that old shack. We have already hired an architect to design a modern 3-story glass structure, and the best part is the backyard. We are putting in an infinity pool that looks right over the city skyline." The guests clapped. They applauded the destruction of my history. They cheered for the erasure of the woman who had raised us. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the ice in the bucket. They were not just buying a house. They were trying to bury the past. They wanted to wipe away the memory of the only person who had ever seen through Tanisha's facade. Tanisha looked directly at me, then her eyes gleaming with malice. "I know you are probably sentimental about it, Kenya," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "But let us be real. That house smells like mothballs and poverty. It is time to move on. Out with the old, in with the new." Right? I gripped the handles of the serving tray until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the house was not for sale because the estate had not settled yet. I wanted to tell them that Grandma had left that house to me in a handwritten will they had conveniently ignored. But I said nothing. I just stared at the infinity pool of arrogance they were drowning in. They wanted to build a monument to their ego on top of my grandmother's garden. They did not know that the land they were planning to dig up was filled with landmines, and I was holding the detonator. The applause for Tanisha's demolition plan was still echoing across the deck when I stepped forward. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. That house in the West End was not just wood and brick. It was the only place I had ever felt safe. It was where Grandma sat with me on the porch swing, telling me that I was smart, that I was worthy, and that my quiet nature was a strength, not a weakness. To hear Tanisha talk about bulldozing it for an infinity pool was like watching her spit on Grandma's grave. "You cannot do that, Tanisha," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. "You cannot tear that house down. It is a historical landmark. It is the heart of this family. Grandma wanted that house preserved. She made us promise." The guests fell silent again. Tanisha looked at me with genuine annoyance, like a queen being interrupted by a court jester. She laughed a short, sharp sound. "Excuse me," she said, tilting her head. "Since when does the help get a vote on property investment? You do not have a name on the deed, Kenya. You do not have $1 to your name. So frankly, your opinion is about as valuable as that tray in your hands." I took a step closer, ignoring the stares. "It is not about money," I insisted. "It is about respect. Grandma loved that house." That was when my mother Beatrice stepped between us. She did not look at Tanisha. She looked directly at me, her eyes narrow and hard. I expected her to defend her mother's legacy. I expected her to say that history mattered. Instead, she delivered the final blow that severed the last thread connecting me to this family. "Stop it, Kenya," Beatrice snapped. "You are embarrassing yourself. You are clinging to the past because you have no future. And do not talk to me about what your grandmother wanted." She took a sip of her wine, savoring the cruelty of her next words. "Your grandmother was senile in her final years," Beatrice said coldly. "That is the only reason she doted on you. She was losing her mind, so she felt sorry for the broken bird of the flock. She pitied you, Kenya. That is not love. That is charity." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Tanisha is the pride of this family." Beatrice continued, gesturing to my sister, who was beaming with triumph. "Look at her. She has a husband. She has a career. She has vision. She has money, and she has power. In this world, that is what matters. That is what makes her the matriarch now. If she wants to tear down a rotting old shack to build a palace, then she has earned that right. You should be taking notes instead of criticizing her." I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. She had just rewritten my entire childhood. She had taken the only pure love I had ever known and twisted it into an act of senility. She worshipped the golden calf that was Tanisha, completely blind to the fact that the gold was fake and the calf was stolen. I did not argue. I did not scream. I just looked at Beatrice and nodded slowly. "You are right, Mother," I said softly. "Tanisha certainly has a vision." I turned away, hiding the small dark smile that was forming on my lips. Beatrice thought Tanisha had the power because she had the money. She did not know that the will Grandma left was not lost. It was in a safety deposit box in Zurich. And she did not know that the house Tanisha was planning to bulldoze already legally belonged to me. Let them dig their hole. I was just going to be the one to push them into it. The party dragged on into the night, the polite chatter transforming into the slurred, raucous noise of wealthy people who had consumed too much expensive scotch. I was exhausted. My feet throbbed in my sneakers and my arms ached from hours of holding the silver serving tray. I was collecting empty glasses near the pool house, trying to stay in the shadows, when a heavy hand clamped around my wrist. I froze. The smell of bourbon and expensive cigars filled my nose. I turned to see one of Carter's college friends, a man named Julian, who worked in hedge funds. His eyes were glazed over, red-rimmed, and wandering over my body with a predatory hunger that made my skin crawl. He wasn't looking at me like a person. He was looking at me like an amenity that came with the rental. "Come on now," Julian slurred, tightening his grip on my arm. "You have been walking around with that tray all night, looking so serious. Why do not you put it down and have a drink with me? We can go check out the cabana. It is nice and private back there." I tried to pull my arm away, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "Please let go of me," I said, keeping my voice low. "I am working." He laughed a wet, ugly sound. "Working. Please. Carter said you are just the sister-in-law who needs a handout. Come on. Do not be a prude. I like a woman who knows her place." Panic flared in my chest. I looked around desperately for help. I spotted Carter standing less than 10 feet away, leaning against the outdoor bar, swirling his drink. He was watching us. He saw Julian pulling at me. He saw the discomfort on my face. "Carter." I called out, my voice sharp with urgency. "Carter, tell your friend to let go of me." Carter looked up. For a second, I expected him to step in. I expected him to have some shred of decency, some protective instinct for his wife's sister. But then I saw the corner of his mouth twitch up into a cruel smile. He pushed off the bar and sauntered over, but he did not look angry at Julian. He looked amused. "Relax," Julian Carter drawled, clapping the man on the shoulder. "She is just playing hard to get." He turned his gaze to me. It was cold dead and utterly devoid of humanity. "And you Kenya stop making a scene," Carter said, sipping his drink. "Julian is a very wealthy man. He manages a $50 million portfolio. Honestly, you should be flattered." I stared at him in disbelief. My arm was still being twisted by a drunk man, and my brother-in-law was negotiating the terms of my harassment. "Carter, he is hurting me," I said, my voice trembling with rage. Carter shrugged, turning to walk away. "So handle it. Be nice to him. Entertain him. If you smile and laugh at his jokes, maybe he will give you a big enough tip to pay off some of your debts. Consider it a networking opportunity." He walked back to the bar, leaving me trapped in Julian's grasp. Julian laughed, emboldened by Carter's permission. "See," he whispered, pulling me closer until I could feel his hot breath on my neck. "Even the boss says it is okay. So how about that drink?" Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, final sound of a bridge burning. Carter had just sold my dignity for a laugh. He had looked at my safety and decided it was less important than his friend's entertainment. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, vibrating fury. I looked at the tray of half-empty champagne glasses in my free hand. I looked at Julian's white linen suit, and I realized that the time for serving was over. The humidity of the evening seemed to vanish, instantly replaced by a chill that radiated from my very bones. Julian was still grinning, his hand heavy and possessive on my arm, pulling me toward the cabana as if I were a piece of luggage he had just purchased. I looked at Carter. He was standing 20 feet away, swirling his scotch, watching his friend manhandle me with a look of bored amusement. He had given his permission. He had looked at my safety and decided it was less important than his friend's entertainment. He had sold my dignity for a networking opportunity. In that split second, the last tether of familial obligation snapped. It did not break with a whimper. It broke with the force of a hurricane. I looked down at the heavy silver tray in my right hand. It was loaded with half-empty flutes of warm champagne and sticky residue. I looked at Julian's pristine white linen suit, the symbol of his unearned arrogance. "I am not going to the cabana." "Julian," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He laughed, leaning in closer, his breath hot and sour on my face. "Do not be like that, sweetheart. Carter said, you need the money." I tightened my grip on the handle of the tray until my knuckles turned white. I said no. I screamed. I did not just drop the tray. I swung it. With every ounce of repressed rage I had stored up over the last 48 hours, I launched the heavy silver platter directly at him. The impact was spectacular. The tray hit Julian square in the chest. 12 crystal glasses shattered simultaneously against the front of his expensive suit. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of breaking glass and twisting metal that cut through the drone of the music like a gunshot. Champagne and sharp shards sprayed everywhere, glittering in the patio lights like deadly confetti. Julian stumbled back, gasping as the cold, sticky liquid soaked instantly into his clothes. He slipped on the wet deck and crashed to the floor, landing in a pile of broken crystal. "You crazy witch," he shrieked, looking down at his ruined suit. "Look what you did." The music cut off. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. Every single guest froze. Tanisha dropped her fork. Carter stood with his glass halfway to his mouth, his eyes bulging as if he had seen a ghost. I stood over Julian, my chest heaving. I was shaking, but for the first time in years, I was standing tall. I wiped a splatter of champagne from my cheek and turned to face the crowd. They were looking at me as if the furniture had suddenly come to life and attacked them. I walked to the center of the patio. My sneakers crunched loudly over the broken glass, grinding it into Tanisha's precious rental floor. I pointed a finger directly at Carter. You think this is funny, Carter? I asked, my voice ringing out clear and cold in the night air. You think my dignity is something you can trade for a favor. You think because I drive a truck and wear old clothes that I am beneath you. I turned to Tanisha. She was pale, clutching her pearls, unable to speak. And you, I continued, my voice rising. You want to bulldoze Grandma's house. You want to erase the only good thing this family ever produced, just so you can have a better view. You call me a failure. You call me a charity case. I looked around at the 30 guests, the investors, the hangers-on. The people who had spent the last 2 days mocking me while drinking wine, paid for by a company that was technically insolvent. Look at you all, I said, letting my gaze linger on each terrified face. You are like vultures pecking at a carcass thinking you are eagles. You are so drunk on your own egos that you do not even realize the branch you are standing on has already been cut. Carter stepped forward, finally finding his voice. You are drunk, Kenya. Go to your room. You are embarrassing the family. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone present. Embarrassing the family, I repeated. Oh, Carter. You have no idea what embarrassment is yet. But you will. I took a step closer to him until I was right in his face. Enjoy this silence, I whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Laugh at the crazy sister-in-law. Make your jokes, because I promise you this. By this time tomorrow, none of you will be laughing. By this time tomorrow, you will be weeping in a language you do not even understand, the language of the bankrupt. I turned on my heel and walked toward the gate. I did not look back at the mess. I did not look back at my family. I walked out of the light and into the darkness, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their own making. They thought the party was ruined. They did not know the funeral for their lifestyle had just begun. The sound of my sneakers crunching on the gravel driveway was the only noise in the oppressive silence of the night. Behind me, the estate was still reeling from the chaos I had unleashed, but I did not look back. I gripped the handle of my battered canvas bag, the same bag Tanisha had thrown at me like garbage just 2 days ago. It felt lighter now. Maybe because I was no longer carrying the weight of their expectations or their cruelty. I was just Kenya again. And Kenya was done playing games. I reached the massive iron gates at the end of the driveway, the same spot where the security guard had sneered at my pickup truck on Friday. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of jasmine, but all I could smell was the burning bridge I had just crossed. Hey! The voice was shrill and breathless. I stopped but did not turn around. Tanisha came jogging down the driveway, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She stopped a few feet behind me, panting. Where do you think you are going? She demanded, trying to regain her composure. You cannot just walk away after making a scene like that. You ruined Julian's suit. You ruined my party. Do you have any idea how much damage control I have to do now? I turned slowly. In the pale moonlight, Tanisha looked less like a queen and more like a frightened child playing dress-up. Her mascara was slightly smudged, and her hands were trembling. I am leaving Tanisha, I said simply. I am freeing up the guest room. Or rather the laundry room. You can put your ego in there. It should fit perfectly. Tanisha let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Leaving. Leaving to go where? You drove that rust bucket truck here and I saw the tow truck take it away yesterday because it was leaking oil. So what is the plan, Kenya? Are you going to walk back to New York? It is 200 miles. Or are you going to hitchhike? She crossed her arms, a smirk returning to her face. She thought she still had the upper hand. She thought I was stranded, helpless, and broke. Go back inside and apologize to Julian, she commanded. Beg him for forgiveness, and maybe Carter will let you sleep on the couch until we figure out a bus ticket for you. Do not be stupid, Kenya. You need us. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years I had believed her lies. I had believed I was the broken one. But standing there in the dark, I realized she was the one who was broken. She was a hollow shell filled with debt and deceit. "I do not need a bus ticket," I said, checking the time on my phone. "My ride is already here." Tanisha rolled her eyes. "What ride? Did you call an Uber with money you do not have?" Before she could finish her sentence, two blinding beams of light cut through the darkness. A low, powerful purr of an engine rumbled up the road. It was not a taxi. It was not a tow truck. It was a phantom black Mercedes Maybach, sleek and menacing like a shark in the water. The car glided to a stop right next to me. The rear door clicked open, and my personal driver, a man named Marcus, who used to be a Navy SEAL, stepped out. He was wearing an immaculate black suit. He ignored Tanisha completely. He walked around the car, bowed his head slightly to me, and took the battered canvas bag from my hand. "Good evening, Ms. Washington," Marcus said, his voice deep and respectful. "The jet is fueled and waiting at the airfield. We can be in the air in 20 minutes. "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, keeping my voice even. Tanisha stood frozen. Her mouth was open but no sound came out. She looked at the car, then at Marcus, then at me. She blinked rapidly, rubbing her eyes as if she were hallucinating. "Whose car is that?" she stammered, pointing a shaking finger. "Kenya. Whose car is that?" I stepped into the plush leather interior, the cool air conditioning washing over me. I looked out at my sister one last time. "It is mine, Tanisha," I said. "Just like the house you are standing in front of." Marcus closed the door, sealing me inside a world of silence and luxury. As we pulled away, I watched Tanisha in the rearview mirror. She was standing alone in the dust, shrinking smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed her whole. She thought I was walking away from my family. She did not realize I was driving toward their reckoning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of aggressive sunshine that felt like a personal endorsement from the universe. Tanisha and Carter stepped out of the elevator onto the 42nd floor of the Lumina headquarters. They looked like $1 million, which was ironic considering they were technically bankrupt and living on borrowed time. Tanisha was wearing a cream-colored power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that screamed authority. Carter had swapped his golf attire for a bespoke navy suit, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed the sleepless night he had spent worrying about the audit. But now, in the light of day, his arrogance had returned. "Did you see the text from Mom?" Tanisha asked, checking her reflection in the polished glass of the office doors. She said Kenya never came back to the rental to pick up her things. The maid threw that ugly canvas bag in the trash this morning. Carter laughed, taking a sip of his double espresso. "Good riddance. She probably hitchhiked back to whatever gutter she crawled out of. I told you she would not have the guts to face us after that tantrum last night. She knows her place now. We dodged a bullet, babe. If she had actually gone to the police, things could have gotten messy. But she ran, like a coward." They walked into the executive suite, nodding at the nervous junior staff. The boardroom was already prepped. Fresh flowers were arranged in the center of the mahogany table. A spread of imported pastries sat untouched on a side table. And prominently displayed in a silver bucket was a bottle of Dom Perignon chilling on ice. Carter rubbed his hands together, looking at the setup with satisfaction. "This is it, Tanisha. The new chairman arrives at 9 sharp. My sources say the acquisition is being led by a silent partner from Onyx Horizon, probably some old retired banker who just wants a passive income stream. He probably does not even know how to read a modern balance sheet." Tanisha ran a hand over the leather executive chair at the head of the table. The chair she thought she would keep. "We just have to stick to the script," she said. "We tell him the deficit is due to market volatility and supply chain issues. We smile, we sign the papers, and we walk away with the retention bonus. Then we buy the house, build the pool, and forget Kenya ever existed." Carter walked over to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. He felt invincible. He thought he had won. "To us," he said, turning back to his wife. "To the winners." They stood there, surrounded by the trappings of a success they had stolen, waiting to charm a naive investor. They were so confident, so blind. They had spent the morning rehearsing their lies, preparing to manipulate a stranger. They had absolutely no idea that the person coming up in the elevator was not a stranger. They did not know that the new chairman was not an old banker, but the woman they had forced to sleep in a laundry room less than 24 hours ago. The elevator bell dinged down the hall. "He is here," Carter hissed, straightening his tie and buttoning his jacket. "It is showtime. Remember, confident, but humble." Tanisha smoothed her skirt and plastered a welcoming synthetic smile on her face. They stood by the double doors, ready to welcome their savior. They thought they were opening the door to a lamb. They did not realize they were about to be locked in a room with a lion. The heavy glass doors of the Lumina building slid open with a soft hiss, admitting a rush of humid city air before sealing the lobby back into its climate-controlled perfection. The space was cavernous, a cathedral of capitalism designed to intimidate. The floors were polished white marble that reflected the recessed lighting like a frozen lake. Usually this room made me feel small. It was a place where people like Carter walked with their heads high, and people like me were expected to use the service entrance. But today, the acoustics of the lobby told a different story. My heels struck the stone floor with a sharp rhythmic precision that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. Click-clack, click-clack. It was the sound of war drums disguised as footwear. I was not wearing the worn-out sneakers or the baggy jeans that Tanisha had mocked all weekend. I was draped in a bespoke power suit from a private atelier in Milan. The fabric was a deep midnight blue silk that shimmered under the lights, tailored so sharply it looked like it could cut skin. The jacket was cinched at the waist, emphasizing a silhouette of absolute command. On my wrist, instead of a hair tie, sat a platinum bracelet that cost more than Tanisha's car. Tanisha was standing near the reception desk, frantically adjusting a vase of lilies. She was checking her watch every 5 seconds, her face a mask of nervous energy. She was waiting for the new chairman. She was waiting for her savior. When she heard the authoritative click of my heels, she spun around, a practiced, sycophantic smile already plastered on her face, ready to greet the billionaire investor. Her eyes landed on me. The smile did not just fade, it crumbled. Her jaw literally dropped. For a second, her brain could not process what she was seeing. She recognized the face, but she could not reconcile it with the aura of wealth radiating from me. Then the recognition clicked into place and panic flooded her eyes. She did not see a successful woman. She saw a disaster. She saw her crazy poor sister crashing the most important day of her life. She sprinted across the lobby, her heels skidding slightly on the smooth floor. She threw her arms out, planting herself directly in my path like a human barricade. "Are you insane?" she hissed, her voice shrill and vibrating with fear. "What are you doing here, Kenya? Did you follow us? Oh my God, look at you. Did you steal those clothes? You look like a child playing dress-up." She looked around frantically, terrified that the real investor would walk in and see this domestic dispute. "Get out!" she shrieked, grabbing at the sleeve of my $10,000 jacket. "You have to leave right now. The new owner is going to be here any second. I am not going to let you ruin this for us. I am not giving you any money. Get out before I have you arrested." I pulled my arm away with a sharp, dismissive motion, dusting off the fabric where she had touched me as if she were contagious. I did not stop walking. I simply stepped around her. "Move, Tanisha," I said, my voice cool and detached. She scrambled to block me again, her face turning red. "Security," she screamed, waving her hands wildly at the guard station. "Hey! You two, get over here. There is a trespasser in the lobby. Remove this crazy woman immediately. She is harassing the executives." 2 uniformed guards looked up from their monitors. They saw Tanisha hysterical and disheveled. Then they looked at me, calm, composed, and dressed in enough wealth to buy the building. They hesitated. They were trained to respect power, and for the first time the power in the room was not coming from Tanisha. It was coming from me. Tanisha stood there, pointing a shaking finger, thinking she was throwing out the trash. She had no idea she was trying to evict the landlord. The echo of Tanisha's shrill command bounced off the marble walls of the lobby. She stood there, arm outstretched, finger pointing accusingly at my chest, panting slightly from her exertion. She looked triumphant. In her mind, the script was playing out exactly as it should. The wealthy executive was ordering the removal of the unwanted pest. Two large security officers marched across the floor. I recognized the man in the lead. It was Mr. Henderson, the chief of security for the building. He was a mountain of a man with a military haircut and a face carved from granite. He had worked in this building for 15 years. Carter had always treated him like a piece of furniture, barely grunting a hello in the mornings. I, on the other hand, had spent the last 2 weeks ensuring that Mr. Henderson's pension plan was fully funded as part of the acquisition deal. Tanisha smirked as they approached, stepping back to give them room to grab me. "Take her out the back," Tanisha instructed, adjusting her blazer with a smug air of authority. "And make sure she stays off the property. We have VIPs arriving any minute." Mr. Henderson walked past Tanisha without even blinking. He did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her order. He moved with a singular purpose, closing the distance between us until he stood directly in front of me. Tanisha frowned, confused by his trajectory. "Hey," she snapped. "I said take her out. Are you deaf?" Mr. Henderson ignored her completely. He stopped 2 feet away from me and snapped his heels together. Then, to Tanisha's absolute horror, the mountain of a man bowed his head. It was not a sarcastic nod. It was a deep, respectful bow reserved for royalty or the highest level of command. "Good morning, Chairman Washington," Mr. Henderson said, his voice booming with a deep baritone that carried across the silent lobby. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Tanisha's mouth fell open. Her eyes darted from Mr. Henderson to me, then back to Mr. Henderson. She blinked rapidly, as if her brain was trying to reboot after a fatal error. "Chairman," she whispered the word, feeling foreign and wrong in her mouth. "What did you call her?" Mr. Henderson straightened up, clasping his hands behind his back. He looked at me with professional adoration. "Welcome to Lumina headquarters, ma'am," he continued, acting as if Tanisha was not even there. "We received your briefing at 6 a.m. The entire security team has been briefed on the new protocols. We have secured the perimeter and your private access pass has been activated." He extended a hand, gesturing toward the far wall where a single gold-plated elevator door stood closed. It was the executive lift, the one that required a biometric scan to even summon. "The private elevator is ready for you, Chairman," he said. "It will take you directly to the boardroom. The board members are assembled and waiting for your address." I nodded slowly, keeping my face impassive. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Excellent work." I stepped forward, moving toward the elevator. Tanisha stood frozen in my path, her face pale, her lips trembling. She looked like she was having a stroke. She reached out a hand to stop me, but her fingers hovered in the air, terrified to touch the silk of my suit. "Chairman?" she stammered, her voice cracking. "Washington, no. That is impossible. You are Kenya. You are the broke sister. You live in a studio. You drive a truck." She looked at Mr. Henderson, desperate for him to share the joke. "Tell her," she pleaded. "Tell her she is crazy." Mr. Henderson stepped between us, his broad back blocking Tanisha from my view. He looked down at her with the cold professional detachment of a bouncer handling an unruly patron. "Ms. Vance," he said sternly, "I suggest you take the service elevator if you wish to attend the meeting. The chairman does not like to be kept waiting. And please lower your voice. You are disturbing the professional atmosphere of this establishment." I did not look back. I walked to the gold doors. I placed my hand on the scanner. The panel turned green instantly. The doors slid open and I stepped into the private sanctuary of power. As the doors began to close, I caught one last glimpse of Tanisha. She was standing alone in the middle of the lobby, small and confused, watching the sister she had tried to bury rise all the way to the top floor. The heavy oak doors to the boardroom did not creak when I pushed them open. They swung inward with the silent, expensive weight of authority. The room beyond was a cavern of glass and steel, suspended 40 floors above the city. It smelled of lemon polish and fear. At the far end of the 30-foot mahogany table sat Carter. He was leaning back in the oversized black leather chair, the chairman's chair, with his feet crossed at the ankles. He was checking his watch, looking every bit the arrogant captain of a ship he did not realize was already underwater. He heard the door open and sighed, not bothering to look up immediately. He assumed it was his secretary, or perhaps Tanisha coming back from her mission to evict me from the lobby. "About time," he muttered, adjusting his silk tie. "I told you to make sure the pastries were fresh. If the new owner walks in and sees stale croissants, heads are going to roll." He finally looked up, ready to bark another order. When his eyes landed on me, his expression shifted from boredom to pure, unadulterated irritation. He did not see the $10,000 suit. He did not see the Cartier bracelet. He only saw the sister-in-law he had tormented for 48 hours. He saw a nuisance. "What are you doing in here, Kenya?" he snapped, slamming his hand down on the armrest. "I thought I told security to throw you out. You have some nerve showing your face after the stunt you pulled last night." I did not answer. I stepped into the room, the door closing softly behind me. I began to walk toward him. My pace was slow, deliberate, and predatory. Carter let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. He shook his head, looking at the empty chairs around the table, as if inviting an invisible audience to witness my stupidity. "You just do not know when to quit, do you?" he sneered. "What is the plan here? Are you going to beg for a job? Are you going to cry and ask me to forgive you for assaulting my friend?" He gestured dismissively toward the sideboard in the corner of the room. "Well, since you are already here, make yourself useful. The catering staff is late. Go brew a fresh pot of coffee. And do not mess it up this time. If you can prove you are capable of performing a menial task without causing a disaster, maybe I will give you a bus ticket home." I kept walking. I passed the rows of empty seats, my eyes locked on his. The distance between us was closing. 20 feet, 10 feet, 5 feet. Carter's smile began to falter. He finally noticed that I wasn't stopping. He finally noticed the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a beaten dog. It was the look of a wolf that had cornered a rabbit. He uncrossed his legs and sat up straighter, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Kenya," he said, his voice losing some of its bravado. "I said, go make the coffee. Are you deaf?" I reached the head of the table. I stood right next to him, towering over him as he sat in the chair he had stolen. I could smell his cologne mixed with the faint sour scent of nervous sweat. He looked up at me, confusion warring with anger. I slowly raised my hand. I extended my index finger and tapped the polished mahogany surface of the table. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was small, but in the silence of the room it sounded like a gavel coming down. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his, so close I could see the blood vessels in his eyes. "Get up, Carter," I said, my voice low and devoid of any warmth. He blinked, stunned. "Excuse me." I straightened up, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. "You heard me?" I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "You are sitting in the wrong chair. That is not a seat for a thief. That is a seat for the owner of this company." Carter laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "You are insane. Get out before I call the police." I smiled, and it was the coldest thing in the room. "Stand up," I commanded. "That is my seat." Carter scrambled out of the chair as if the leather had suddenly turned into molten lava. He did not move because he respected me. He moved because the heavy double doors swung open at that exact moment, and the 12 members of the Lumina Board of Directors filed into the room. They were grave men and women in dark suits, clutching binders and looking at their watches. Carter could not be seen wrestling his sister-in-law for a chair in front of the people who controlled his salary. He stood up, straightening his jacket, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. I did not hesitate. I lowered myself into the oversized executive chair. It was still warm from his body, but as I leaned back and placed my arms on the rests, the seat seemed to cool instantly, accepting its true master. I spun slowly to face the room. Tanisha rushed in behind the board members, breathless and frantic. When she saw me sitting at the head of the table, she let out a strangled gasp that sounded like a dying animal. "Get up!" she shrieked, forgetting all professional decorum. You are humiliating us. Security is on the way. Please, everyone ignore her. My sister is having a mental breakdown. She thinks she works here. She lunged toward me, her hand reaching for my shoulder. Sit down, Tanisha, I said. I did not shout. I did not scream. I spoke with the quiet, absolute authority of a woman who signs the front of the check, not the back. My voice struck the room like a gavel. Tanisha froze. The board members stopped shuffling their papers and looked up. They looked at Tanisha, disheveled and hysterical. Then they looked at me, composed, impeccable, and radiating power. I am not having a breakdown. I continued, locking eyes with a gray-haired man at the center of the table. I am having a meeting, and unless you wanted to be escorted out by the security team that now reports to me, I suggest you take a seat in the back and remain silent. Carter stepped forward, his face purple. Who do you think you are, Kenya? This is a closed-door meeting for the acquisition partners. We are waiting for the representative from Onyx Horizon. You are a waitress. You are a nobody. Get out of my chair. I smiled. It was a terrifyingly calm smile. You are waiting for Onyx Horizon, I repeated softly. You are waiting for the firm that specializes in distressed assets and hostile takeovers. You are waiting for the capital that is going to save this sinking ship you call a company. I reached into the inner pocket of my silk jacket. Carter flinched as if he thought I was pulling out a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out a heavy black titanium business card embossed with silver lettering. I slid it across the mahogany table. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop right in front of Carter's trembling hands. Pick it up, Carter, I commanded. Read it. Read it out loud so the entire board can hear who you have been treating like a servant all weekend. Carter looked down. His hands shook as he picked up the card. He squinted at the silver text. The color drained from his face instantly, leaving him looking like a corpse. His knees buckled, and he had to grab the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. Read it, I said, my voice sharp as a whip. Carter swallowed hard. His voice was a whisper, barely audible. Kenya Washington. He read, his voice breaking. Founder and managing partner. Onyx Horizon Capital. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. Tanisha gagged, clutching her chest. The board members gasped, murmuring among themselves. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my steepled fingers. That is right, I said, staring into Carter's soul. I am not the charity case. I am not the poor relation. I am the bank. I am the investor who owns the debt on your house, the lease on your car, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, 51% of this company. You spent the weekend laughing at me because you thought I was beneath you. You did not realize that while you were playing rich, you were auditioning for your lives. And gentlemen, I have to say, you failed the audition. The silence in the boardroom was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. I watched Carter slump into his chair, looking like a man who had just seen his own ghost. But I was not finished. Not yet. I slowly swiveled the massive leather executive chair to the left, turning my attention to the woman standing by the wall. Tanisha was pressing her back against the expensive wallpaper as if she were trying to merge with it and disappear. Her hands were trembling so violently that her diamond bracelet rattled against her watch. She looked at me with a mixture of terror and confusion, her brain unable to reconcile the sister she bullied with the billionaire sitting at the head of the table. I rested my elbows on the mahogany table and interlaced my fingers, staring at her until she was forced to meet my gaze. You have been very quiet, Tanisha, I said, my voice smooth and low. It is a refreshing change from the weekend. I seem to recall you had quite a lot to say when we were at the estate. Tanisha opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She closed it again, swallowing hard. I remember a specific conversation we had on the golf course. I continued, leaning back comfortably. Carter was busy embezzling company funds to buy equipment, and you were busy analyzing my life choices. You looked me up and down with that sneer you have perfected since high school. Do you remember what you asked me? I paused, letting the question hang in the air. The board members turned to look at Tanisha. She shrank under their collective scrutiny. "You asked me if I was still unemployed," I said, answering for her. "You asked if I was still struggling. You mocked me for not having a career. You told me that at 32 years old I was a failure because I did not have a 9-to-5 job like you. You said I was lazy. You said I slept too much while you and Carter were out there grinding." I stood up slowly. I walked around the table, the sound of my heels echoing in the quiet room. I stopped right in front of her. She flinched, but I did not touch her. I did not need to. My presence was enough. "You were right about one thing, Tanisha," I said softly. "I do not have a job." I looked around the room at the glass walls overlooking the city, at the nervous board members, at the trembling executives. "A job is something you apply for," I explained, my voice hardening. "A job is something you can lose if your boss is in a bad mood. A job is what you have, Tanisha. It is a fragile, temporary thing that pays you just enough to keep you in debt and obedient." I leaned in close to her so she could see the cold certainty in my eyes. "I do not have a job," I whispered. "I have an empire." I gestured to the window encompassing the skyline. "I own Onyx Horizon. I own the building we are standing in. I own the debt that keeps your lights on. I own the mortgage on your rental property. I do not work for a paycheck, Tanisha. I write the paychecks. I do not climb the corporate ladder. I own the ladder, and I own the ground it stands on." Tanisha let out a small, pathetic sob. The reality was finally sinking in. She realized that every insult she had thrown at me over the last 48 hours had been a joke. She had been bragging about her allowance to the person who owned the bank. "So the answer is no," I concluded, stepping back and looking at her with pity. "I am not looking for work. But considering what I found in the audit this morning, you and Carter should probably start updating your resumes. Although given what is coming next, I doubt anyone is going to hire you." I walked slowly back to the head of the table, the silence in the room amplifying the sound of my heels. Carter was still gripping the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles white sweat beading on his forehead. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner to drop the axe. He did not have to wait long. I reached for the sleek black remote control that sat in the center of the console. I did not look at it. I knew exactly where the button was. I pressed it with a definitive click. The heavy motorized blinds on the floor-to-ceiling windows descended with a low hum, blocking out the bright Manhattan sunlight and plunging the boardroom into a twilight gloom. A moment later, a massive projection screen lowered from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The projector fan whirred to life, cutting through the silence like a jet engine. A beam of blue light cut through the darkness, hitting the screen. The image that resolved was not a quarterly projection graph or a marketing strategy. It was a high-definition scan of a bank transfer. I watched the color drain from Carter's face until he looked like a sheet of paper. "This is slide 1, I said, my voice calm and professorial. "This is a wire transfer for $120,000 labeled as logistics infrastructure." I clicked the remote. The image changed to a photograph. It was a picture of a brand new Porsche 911 sitting in a driveway. The license plate was visible. "And this," I continued, pointing the laser pointer at the screen, "is the actual infrastructure. It seems the company needed a very fast German sports car to transport documents between the office and the golf course." The board members gasped. One of them, a woman in a gray suit, pushed her glasses up her nose and leaned forward, squinting at the screen in disbelief. I clicked again. The screen filled with a complex web of transactions. Slide 2. Here we have monthly payments of $15,000 going to C&T Strategic Partners for brand consulting. I clicked to the next slide. It was a screenshot of the corporate registry for C&T Strategic Partners. As you can see, the registered agent for this consulting firm is Tanisha Vance, and the registered address is a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. Tanisha let out a small strangled whimper from the back of the room. She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, muttering "no" over and over again. I turned to look at them. They were huddled together, small and pathetic, in the face of the undeniable truth glowing on the screen behind me. "Do you remember Sunday morning, Carter?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do you remember when you handed me a stack of messy spreadsheets and a pen? You offered me $500 to fix the variances. You told me to bury these numbers under operational costs. You wanted me to hide your theft so the new owners would not find it." I walked over to where Carter sat. I placed my hands on the table and leaned in. I did not refuse because I was lazy. I did not refuse because I was incapable. I refused because I am a forensic accountant by trade, and I know that the difference between a bad investment and a federal crime is the paper trail. I gestured to the screen where a summary of their stolen millions was now displayed in red ink. "I did not fix your report, Carter, because I did not want to destroy the evidence. I wanted to preserve it. Every invoice, every wire transfer, every fake receipt. I needed them pristine. I needed them accurate. Because I am not just firing you today. I am handing this entire presentation to the Federal Bureau of Investigation on my way out. You wanted me to help you avoid a scandal. Instead, I just prepared the opening statement for your trial." I turned my back on Carter and Tanisha, leaving them to marinate in the reality of their impending prosecution. But I was not finished clearing the rot from this building. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on the faces of the department heads who were sitting around the table. I recognized them. They were the same people who had been at the party on Sunday. They were the sycophants who had laughed when Carter made jokes about my poverty. They were the ones who had treated me like an invisible servant while they drank champagne on a deck paid for with stolen money. I walked over to the blonde woman sitting on the left side of the table. Sheila, the head of design. She was wearing a pinstripe suit, shrinking into her chair, trying desperately to avoid eye contact. Her face was pale, devoid of the arrogance she had worn by the pool when she accused me of stealing silverware. "Hello, Sheila," I said, my voice pleasant but sharp. "I believe we met yesterday. You were very concerned about the security of your purse. You told your friend that the help has a habit of taking souvenirs." Sheila swallowed hard, her hands trembling on her notebook. "I am so sorry, Ms. Washington," she stammered. "I had no idea who you were. It was a misunderstanding." I shook my head slowly. "No, Sheila. The misunderstanding is that you think you still have a job here." I picked up a file from the stack on the table and tossed it in front of her. "My audit team looked at the fall collection you are proposing. It is remarkably similar to the portfolio of a junior designer you fired 3 months ago. In fact, it is identical. You are not just a mean-spirited person, Sheila. You are a plagiarist. You have been stealing concepts from your subordinates and claiming them as your own for 2 years." I pointed to the door. "You are fired for intellectual property theft and gross misconduct. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal items. Do not touch the computer." I did not wait for her to respond. I turned my attention to the man sitting across from her. Julian, the man who had grabbed my arm, the man I had covered in champagne. He was wearing a new suit, but he looked green around the gills, likely nursing a hangover from the party he thought would never end. "And Julian," I said, walking toward him, "the vice president of sales." He tried to smile, a weak, terrified twitch of his lips. "Look, Kenya, let us not be hasty. I bring in a lot of revenue. What happened at the party was just a joke. We were all blowing off steam." "A joke," I repeated, my face hardening into stone. "Sexual harassment is not a joke, Julian. And according to these sales reports, you have not brought in a single new client in 6 months. You have been coasting on legacy accounts that Carter handed to you. You spend 4 days a week on the golf course and expense it as client development." I leaned down, staring into his bloodshot eyes. "We are implementing a new zero-tolerance policy for harassment and incompetence. You violate both. You are terminated immediately. And Julian, you might want to call your lawyer. The severance package for cause is $0. I looked around at the rest of the room. The remaining board members were terrified, realizing that the party was truly over. "This is not a country club," I announced, my voice ringing with finality. "This is a business. If you obtained your position because you are a friend of Carter or Tanisha, start packing. If you are here to work, we can talk. But the era of nepotism and laziness ended the moment I walked through that door. Clear out. All of you. The silence in the boardroom did not last long. It was shattered by the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots hitting the marble floor in the hallway outside. It sounded like a stampede. The double doors, which had been closed to seal in Carter's shame, were thrown open with enough force to bounce off the walls. 6 men and women in dark blue windbreakers with yellow block letters spelling FBI burst into the room. They moved with a terrifying synchronized efficiency. They did not look at the view. They did not look at the terrified board members. They had eyes for only one man. Federal agents. The lead officer shouted, his voice booming through the acoustic space. Nobody move. Keep your hands where we can see them. Carter scrambled backward, tripping over his own expensive Italian leather shoes. He backed into the window, looking for an escape route that did not exist unless he planned on jumping 40 stories down to the pavement. Carter Vance. The agent announced, stepping forward with a pair of steel handcuffs already in his grip. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and the embezzlement of corporate assets. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Carter's face was a mask of sheer terror. The arrogance that had defined him for years evaporated instantly, leaving behind a shivering, pathetic coward. He held his hands up, shaking violently. No, wait, Carter stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. There has been a mistake. I am just the CFO. I just manage the accounts. I do not make the decisions. The agent spun him around, slamming him against the glass wall. The metallic ratchet of the handcuffs tightening around his wrists echoed through the room like a gunshot. You have the right to remain silent, the agent recited, pulling Carter away from the wall. But Carter did not remain silent. He did exactly what I knew he would do. He broke. He looked around the room, his eyes wild until they landed on Tanisha. She was standing in the corner, clutching her purse, tears streaming down her face in silent shock. It was her! Carter screamed, twisting in the agent's grip to point his chin at his wife. She made me do it. Look at her. Look at the clothes. Look at the jewelry. She is the one who wanted the house. She is the one who wanted the lifestyle. I just did what she told me to do. She is the mastermind. Tanisha gasped, taking a step back as if he had physically slapped her. Carter, she whispered, horrified. How can you say that? She threatened to leave me if I did not get the money, Carter yelled, spit flying from his mouth as the agents dragged him toward the door. She is the one you want. She set up the shell companies. She signed the papers. Arrest her. Do not take me. It is all her fault. I watched from the head of the table, my expression unmoving. It was the final act of a tragedy. The man who claimed to be the protector, the provider, the strong leader was willing to send his own wife to prison to save his own skin. He was not a king. He was a rat. I looked at Tanisha. She was staring at her husband as he was hauled away, listening to him beg the agents to take her instead. In that moment, her heart broke. Not because she was losing her money, but because she finally saw the man she had married. She saw the monster underneath the suit. The agents dragged Carter out into the hallway, his screams echoing until the elevator doors slid shut, cutting him off. The room fell silent again, save for the sound of Tanisha's jagged breathing. I stood up slowly and smoothed my jacket. The air in the room felt cleaner already. The trash had been taken out. Tanisha collapsed to her knees on the plush boardroom carpet. Her cream-colored power suit was rumpled, and her mascara ran down her face in dark, ugly streaks. She reached out for my hand, but I stepped back, leaving her grasping at the air. "Kenya, please," she sobbed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I did not know. He lied to me too. We are sisters. You cannot let them ruin me. I have nothing left. Please help me." I looked down at her, not with anger, but with a distant cold pity. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a single crisp document. I held it up so she could see her own signature scrawled at the bottom. "You are not going to jail today, Tanisha," I said, my voice steady and factual. "But you are going to lose everything else. You co-signed every single business loan Carter took out. That means his debt is now your debt. The bank is seizing the rental deposit. They are taking the car. They are foreclosing on your condo. And Tanisha, I added, looking at the orange handbag she was clutching like a lifeline. You might want to hand that over too. Although since it is a fake Birkin, it probably will not cover much of the interest. The phone vibrated violently against the polished mahogany table. It was the final loose end. The screen flashed the name, Mother. I did not pick it up to my ear. I pressed the speaker button so the entire room could hear the shrill voice that had haunted my childhood. "Kenya, you spiteful little witch!" Beatrice screamed, her voice distortion crackling through the air. I just heard from Tanisha. How could you do this to your own family? You are a cold-blooded snake. You destroyed your sister out of jealousy just because she is successful and you are nothing. I am ashamed to call you my daughter. I watched Tanisha weeping on the floor. I did not feel shame. I felt closure. I waited for her to take a breath before I spoke. Hello, Mother. I am glad you called. It saves me the trouble of sending a registered letter. You might want to start finding some boxes. Beatrice paused, confusion entering her voice. What are you talking about? You see, Carter transferred the deed of your house to Lumina Corporation 3 years ago to hide assets from the IRS. I explained, my voice flat and businesslike. Since I just acquired Lumina, I now own the roof over your head. And Mother, I am liquidating all non-essential assets immediately. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. I tapped the red button, ending the call and the relationship forever. There is one final matter to settle regarding the estate. You and Mother spent years convincing everyone that Grandma was senile in her final days. You claimed she forgot to write a will so you could divide her assets amongst yourselves. But she did not forget Tanisha. She knew exactly who you were and she knew exactly what you would try to do. That is why she did not trust you with the paperwork. I walked over to Tanisha and dropped a photocopy of a vintage document onto her lap. You thought you destroyed the only copy, but Grandma sent the original to a private archivist in Europe decades ago. I recovered it last week. The house in the West End was never yours to sell, and it was never Carter's to bulldoze. She left it entirely to me. That house will not be turned into a modern glass box with an infinity pool. It will be restored and preserved as a historical landmark. It will remain a sanctuary for the kind of love and warmth you and Mother were never capable of understanding. And the best part is that since it is now private property, you are officially trespassing if you ever go near it again. Mr. Henderson did not drag her. He was too professional for that. He simply walked behind her, a silent wall of muscle, ensuring she did not stop until she reached the revolving doors. Tanisha clutched the small cardboard box to her chest. It contained a stapler, a half-used lipstick, and a framed photo of her and Carter smiling on a boat that had been repossessed an hour ago. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, and the humid heat of the New York afternoon hit her like a physical blow. The city did not care. People rushed past her, bumping her shoulder without apologizing, their eyes glued to their phones. Just yesterday, she would have screamed at them. She would have demanded respect. But today, she was invisible. She looked up at the towering glass facade of the Lumina building. It reflected the sky and the clouds, a fortress she was now barred from entering. A taxi pulled up to the curb, and for a second she instinctively reached for the handle before remembering she had no way to pay for it. She pulled her hand back and stood there shivering in the heat, realizing that for the first time in her life, she had nowhere to go. I looked out at the sea of anxious faces gathered in the open plan office. The room was quieter now. The rot had been cut out, but the fear remained. You are all wondering if you are next. You are wondering if this ship is going down. Let me be clear. Lumina Corporation died today. It died the moment the handcuffs clicked shut on Carter Vance. We are not rebuilding the old way. We are starting over. Effective immediately, this company is rebranded as Heritage Capital. We are stripping away the toxic culture of arrogance and exclusion. There will be no more hidden accounts and no more looking down on people based on their background. Our mission is no longer buying sports cars for executives. Our mission is building generational wealth for those who have been systematically shut out. We are going to invest in minority-owned businesses. We are going to revitalize neighborhoods like the West End instead of bulldozing them. The era of arrogance is over. The era of impact begins now. If you are ready to work for a purpose greater than a paycheck, then welcome to the team. Let us get to work. The steady hum of the Gulfstream engines was a lullaby that washed away the chaos of the last 48 hours. I sat back in the deep cream-colored leather seat and watched the world disappear beneath me. New York City, with all its noise and ambition and cruelty, was now just a grid of glittering lights fading into the distance. From up here, the Lumina building looked like nothing more than a toy block. The immense ego of Carter Vance and the desperate vanity of my sister Tanisha were invisible from 40,000 feet. A flight attendant moved silently through the cabin. She placed a crystal glass on the side table, the deep ruby liquid of a vintage Chateau Margaux catching the light. She did not sneer at me. She did not judge my sketchbook. She simply smiled and asked if I needed anything else before retreating to the galley. I picked up the glass, swirling the wine slowly. I took a sip, letting the complex flavors settle on my tongue. It tasted like victory. But more than that, it tasted like freedom. On the table in front of me lay my charcoal pencils and a fresh pad of paper. I had already sketched the outline of Grandma's house. I was going to redesign the garden, planting hydrangeas exactly where she used to have them. I was going to restore the porch swing. I was going to make it beautiful again, not for the approval of a magazine, but for the memory of the woman who loved me. We were heading to Paris. The pilot had told me the weather in France was overcast, but I did not mind. I was going there to visit the galleries, to breathe in the air of a city that valued creation over consumption. I was going to walk along the Seine and remember who I was before I had to become a warrior to survive my own family. I looked out the window at the endless blanket of clouds. They looked soft, like a clean slate. It was funny to think about how this weekend started. I had driven my old pickup truck up that driveway hoping for a family dinner. I had walked into that house with an open heart, only to have it trampled by people who measured worth by the label on a handbag. They saw my worn-out jeans and assumed I was broken. They saw my silence and assumed I was weak. They saw my kindness and assumed I was a fool. They spent 3 days laughing at me, making jokes about my poverty, throwing crumbs of pity my way, while stealing from the very company I owned. I took another sip of wine, a small smile playing on my lips. They laughed at me because I had no job. They mocked me because I did not have a title on a business card they could understand. They were so busy climbing the ladder that they never stopped to look at who built the ladder in the first place. I laughed at them because they thought working for me was being the boss. They thought the appearance of wealth was the same thing as power. They never understood that true power does not need to shout. It does not need to show off. True power is being the one who can turn off the lights when the party is over. I closed my sketchbook and looked at the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The lesson they learned today was a hard one, but it was necessary. Never judge a book by its worn cover. You never know what is written on the pages inside. And you should be especially careful when judging that book, because you might just find out that the book owns the whole library. The most profound lesson here is that true power never needs to shout. Tanisha and Carter were so blinded by their arrogance and obsession with superficial status that they mistook silence for weakness. They learned too late that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one listening, not the one bragging. This story reminds us that integrity and competence will always outlast fraud and pretension. Never judge someone by their current chapter, because you don't know who holds the pen writing the rest of the book. Real wealth is freedom, not just a paycheck. If you believe in moving in silence and letting your success make the noise, hit that like button and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your true worth? Let's celebrate your victory.